Thought-provoking hook and theme presentation, introduced the theme in an engaging way, highlighting the idea that miracles can have a scientific explanation, but without diminishing God's divine power. Maintain the mystery and questioning about how science and miracles can supernaturally coexist. The purpose of this chapter is to explain the concept of how science can be seen as an extension of God's power since creation, and to relate divine creation to the origin of natural laws, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. Is there a scientific explanation for divine phenomena? Join us on an intriguing journey where miracles and the multiverse theory meet. Does science unveil the supernatural, or does it merely reveal the complexity of God's divine power? Explore the fascinating coexistence of faith and reason, without diminishing the majesty of God. Imagine the universe, in its vastness and complexity, as the greatest work of art ever created. Now, imagine that the laws governing it, from gravity to quantum physics, are not mere coincidences, but divine brushstrokes. Here, science can be seen not as an antagonist to faith, but as an extension of God's own power manifested since the beginning of time. Divine creation and the origin of natural laws are intrinsically linked, suggesting that the Creator not only made the universe but also established the rules that govern it. The Big Bang Theory, for instance, describes a moment of singularity, a point of origin for all matter and energy. For many, this beginning does not contradict the idea of divine creation but rather provides a framework for it. God, in His omnipotence, could have initiated the universe with the precise conditions for the laws of physics and chemistry to manifest and evolve. Every natural law, every cosmological constant, can be interpreted as a reflection of divine intelligence and design. If the multiverse, as some theories suggest, exists, it could be another expression of God's infinite creative capacity. Instead of limiting divine power to a single universe, the possibility of multiple universes, each with its own laws and realities, would expand our understanding of God's magnitude. From this perspective, science becomes a tool to unravel the mechanisms and wonders of creation, revealing the order and logic behind apparent chaos. Thus, when we speak of miracles, we are not necessarily seeking a breach of natural laws, but perhaps a manipulation of these laws by their original architect. It's like a programmer who, having created a complex system, can intervene and modify its functioning at specific moments. Science allows us to understand the code, but God holds the key to its alteration. Divine wisdom, therefore, not only established the universe but also has the ability to act within and beyond its laws, without diminishing the validity of scientific inquiry. The purpose of this chapter is to present biblical examples of miracles and suggest plausible scientific explanations, emphasizing that, even with scientific explanations, God's action is central to all miracles, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. As we explore biblical miracles, the curious mind of science naturally seeks explanations. The parting of the Red Sea by Moses, for example, is an extraordinary event. While faith directly attributes it to divine intervention, some scientific theories propose that natural phenomena, such as strong winds and extreme tides in shallow waters, could have contributed to the opening of a temporary passage. Similarly, the manna that fed the Israelites in the desert might have been a type of lichen or insect secretion that grows in certain desert regions and is edible. However, even if there are plausible scientific explanations, God's action is central to all these miracles. The synchronization of these events with the needs of the people, the magnitude of the impact, and the perfect timing all point to a higher intelligence. It's not just a natural phenomenon happening, but it happening precisely when and where it was needed to fulfill a divine purpose. Consider the story of Joshua and the sun standing still. While a literal interpretation is challenging for physics, some hypotheses suggest astronomical phenomena like solar eclipses or atmospheric refractions that could have created the illusion of a prolonged day. Another theory is that the stopping of the sun could be a poetic way to describe a prolonged battle or an event that caused a sense of suspended time. In the case of the plagues of Egypt, many of them can be explained by a sequence of ecological events. The plague of the Nile turning to blood could be a proliferation of red algae, the frogs, an increase in their population due to ecological imbalance, and the boils, insect-borne diseases. However, the intensity, sequence, and selectivity of these plagues, affecting the Egyptians while sparing the Israelites, point to a divine orchestration. The crucial point is that the search for scientific explanations does not need to diminish divine power, but can, in fact, highlight the Creator's genius. God can operate through the natural laws He Himself established, bending them, accelerating them, or applying them in ways we do not yet fully understand. Science attempts to unravel the how, but faith answers the who and the why. The mystery is not dispelled but deepened, revealing a God who is both the legislator and the intervener in His own universe. The purpose of this chapter is to explore how natural laws can reflect God's divine power, and to show that science, while useful for explaining certain aspects, does not diminish divine control over miracles, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. The natural laws that govern our universe, from Newton's classical mechanics to Einstein's relativity and quantum mechanics, are often seen as immutable and independent principles. However, a theological perspective views them as a direct reflection of God's divine power. They are not mere coincidences, but the manifestation of the Creator's order, logic, and intelligence. Imagine them as the instruction manual God wrote for the functioning of the cosmos. The precision of these laws is astonishing. The fine-tuning of physical constants, the strength of gravity, the charge of the electron, the speed of light, is so exact that any small variation would make life impossible. For many, this is not the work of chance but evidence of intelligent design. It's as if the universe was calibrated by a supreme engineer to allow for the existence of stars, planets, and ultimately, life. This fine-tuning is one of the cosmological arguments for the existence of God. Science, in unraveling these laws, does not diminish divine control over miracles, on the contrary, it can even reinforce it. If God is the author of natural laws, He also has the prerogative to operate through them in ways that transcend our current understanding. A miracle would not necessarily be a breach of natural law, but perhaps the application of a higher law, or a manipulation of existing laws in a way that we, with our limited perspective, perceive as extraordinary. Consider the idea of the multiverse. If multiple universes existed, each with its own slightly different physical laws, our universe with its specific laws for life would not just be a coincidence, but perhaps a divine choice. God, in His infinite wisdom, could have selected or created a universe where the conditions for life were ideal. Science, in exploring these possibilities, only allows us to glimpse the complexity and depth of God's creative power. Therefore, when science explains the rainbow in terms of light refraction and dispersion, it does not diminish the beauty or divine meaning of God's promise. It merely reveals the mechanics behind the wonder. Similarly, understanding the chemical reactions behind wine fermentation does not invalidate Jesus' miracle at Cana. Instead, science invites us to admire the divine intelligence that designed a universe capable of such phenomena, be they natural or miraculous. Faith and science can coexist, each offering a different lens to appreciate the grandeur of God. The purpose of this chapter is to choose a specific miracle and discuss its possible scientific explanations, affirming that, regardless of the explanations, God remains the author of the miracle, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. Let's focus on a specific miracle from the New Testament, the healing of the man born blind by Jesus, as narrated in John 9. This is a particularly intriguing case because the man was not just blind, but born blind, implying a congenital malformation or structural damage. For medicine of the time and even today, restoring the sight of someone who never had it is an extraordinary feat, bordering on impossible without complex surgical intervention. How would science try to explain this? For a modern doctor, congenital blindness can have various causes. Underdeveloped retina, damaged optic nerve, severe congenital cataracts, among others. For a scientific explanation of the miracle, it would be necessary to postulate a form of extremely rapid and complete cellular repair or regeneration. We could theorize about the activation of the body's self-repair mechanisms at a cellular level that we do not yet understand, or perhaps a manipulation of proteins and cells themselves so that they reorganize perfectly. A more speculative approach, perhaps inspired by the multiverse theory, could suggest that Jesus, in some way, accessed or influenced a parallel reality where the man already had perfect vision, or that he acted as a catalyst for a quantum reconfiguration of matter. However, these are mere speculations that extrapolate beyond our current understanding of physics and biology. Science, in its current state, does not possess the tools to explain the instantaneous reversal of such a complex congenital condition. Nevertheless, regardless of any attempt at scientific explanation, God remains the author of the miracle. Jesus' action in healing the blind man was not a random event or a fortunate coincidence. It was an intentional act of divine power, demonstrating his authority over creation and his compassion for humanity. Even if, hypothetically, science one day discovers the biological mechanisms that allowed such a healing, it would not nullify the miraculous nature of the event. On the contrary, if science can one day replicate such a healing, it would only be because it has unveiled one of the many laws or processes that God already uses. Science teaches us about the how, but the who and the why remain in the realm of faith and theology. The miracle of the man born blind reminds us that God's power transcends our limitations and that his intervention can operate in ways that defy our logic and understanding. Science can illuminate the path, but the guiding light remains divine. The purpose of this chapter is to address New Testament miracles and how science can suggest explanations, but God's power is behind all events, highlighting the harmony between faith and science, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. The miracles of the New Testament are often the point of greatest tension between faith and science, as many of them openly defy natural laws as we know them. The raising of Lazarus, the transformation of water into wine, the multiplication of loaves and fishes, and above all, Jesus' own resurrection, are events that science cannot replicate or explain with its current tools. However, this does not mean that there is no harmony between faith and science. It means that science, by its nature, has limits in its ability to comprehend the supernatural. Consider the transformation of water into wine at Cana. Chemically, transforming water into wine involves the addition of sugars, yeasts, and a fermentation process that takes time. The most radical scientific explanation for the miracle would be such a drastic acceleration of chemical reactions that they would occur instantly. This would require energy and molecular manipulation at a level far beyond any human technology. Science can describe the process, but it cannot create it from nothing, nor in an instant. The multiplication of loaves and fishes is another example. Physics and biology tell us that matter cannot be created or multiplied from nothing. A scientific explanation, however forced, might suggest that sharing inspired people to reveal their own hidden food, creating the illusion of multiplication. However, this explanation underestimates the biblical narrative and the amazement of the crowds. The miracle, for faith, is the creation or restructuring of matter by divine power. Nevertheless, the central point is that, even if science can suggest partial or hypothetical explanations for some aspects of miracles, God's power is behind all events. Divine intervention is not random, it has a purpose and an intention. Jesus did not heal by chance, nor did he multiply loaves without reason. His miracles were signs of his divinity, demonstrations of the kingdom of God, and acts of compassion. The beauty lies in recognizing that science investigates how the universe works, while faith addresses why it was created and who sustains it. When science reaches its limits, faith fills the gap, not with ignorance, but with an understanding that there is a creator who transcends the laws he himself established. The harmony between faith and science lies in understanding that both perspectives can coexist, each offering a different lens to understand the grandeur and mystery of the universe and its creator. The purpose of this chapter is to conclude with a reflection on how science, although useful, will never be able to fully comprehend divine mysteries, ending with the idea that science starts from a limited human perspective, while God transcends human understanding, using the theme as a basis for the chapter. We arrive at the core of the matter: science, though useful, will never be able to fully comprehend divine mysteries. No matter how much quantum physics reveals the oddities of the microworld, or cosmology transports us to the reaches of the universe, these are just explorations within a created system. Science operates within the observable laws and phenomena of the physical universe. It relies on measurement, experimentation, repetition, and empirical logic. God, on the other hand, transcends all of this. He is not an entity within the universe but the creator of the universe. The laws of physics, chemistry, biology, all are manifestations of His will and wisdom. Trying to confine God to our scientific understanding is like trying to fit the ocean into a cup. The human mind, with its limitations of perception, processing, and time, is inherently incapable of grasping the totality of the divine. If we consider the multiverse theory, science can speculate about the existence of infinite universes, each with its own laws and realities. However, even if this were true, we would still be talking about creations, about something that was made. Who, then, created the multiverse? Science can lead us to the edge of the abyss, but it cannot give us the final leap to understanding the origin of all that exists. Faith, in contrast, accepts the idea of a God who is infinite, eternal, omniscient, and omnipotent. He is not subject to the laws He Himself created, but has the power to intervene and operate beyond them, or through them in ways that escape our analysis. A miracle, from this perspective, is not a breach of natural law, but a demonstration of divine control over the laws He Himself established. It's as if the master programmer of the universe could rewrite the code in real time. Our human perspective is limited. We see the world through filters of time, space, and matter. God, however, is timeless, infinite, and immaterial. Science offers us a detailed map of the forest, but God is the creator of the entire forest, the mountain, and all dimensions we cannot even conceive. Therefore, scientific inquiry is commendable and reveals the incredible complexity and beauty of creation, but it will always point to something greater, something that transcends human understanding and invites us to admiration and faith. Science teaches us about what we can see and measure. Faith connects us with what lies beyond what can be seen. Conclude with a reflection that leaves the reader questioning the relationship between science and divinity. Maintain the mystery of how science may attempt to explain, but God remains beyond our comprehension. After all, miracles and the multiverse theory invite us to a profound reflection. Are scientific explanations for divine phenomena the final frontier, or merely a glimpse into the mind of a creator who operates beyond our comprehension? The mystery persists, science tries to decipher the how, but God remains in a realm where faith is the true lens.